Ryan Detrick will be joining us in the next segment. He's LPL's Chief Market Strategist. We are always blessed to have Ryan join us about once a month to talk about the markets, and always there are a lot to talk about with that, with COVID still out there, the 2020 elections now about 3 weeks away, less than 3 weeks away. That is hard to believe.
Yes.
And, of course, a stimulus package still being bantered around in Congress and kind of stuck in the mud one day and looking like progress the next. So we'll talk to Ryan in the next segment to get your market and economic fix. But we're talking about today getting unstuck and on track to becoming financially independent. You know, when I think about being stuck, I have to admit that I think about treadmills. I really do. I'm a little bit of I hate to call myself a runner because I'm not as committed as what I would think a runner needs to be. But I do run. I jog frequently, and I hate running on a treadmill. I can't stand it.
I do have to give you credit for being way more of a runner than either John or I are or ever have been.
I have a treadmill.
How much dust does it have on it?
We're not
having a treadmill. Yeah, having a treadmill is...
And using one, those are two different things.
That needs a credit card. That's all you need to have a treadmill. I just actually jogged this morning, and it's, beautiful morning here in fall in Arkansas.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
about 55, 60 degrees, and the sun is out, and you're looking ahead to the road ahead of you, and that helps me get through it. I think that, I love being outside. I love seeing the trees and nature, but I also... I can recall many times picking out, I'm going to just make it to the next mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to make it to the next block. And being able to pick out a spot ahead of me and move forward, as opposed to just really, honestly, you're picking your feet up and putting them down. You can get exercise, but you're not really getting anywhere.
Isn't this the same philosophy behind Peloton? Isn't this why Peloton has emerged as being this big deal of exercise equipment, because they've got that interactive and they have the video of all these places that you can go and everything. Mm-hmm. It is a human desire to make progress.
Yeah.
And if you're not making progress on your money, then you're really frustrated. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where a lot of people get, maybe because they're not making progress on their money, but maybe because they don't have the right perspective. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And maybe they don't have the right ingredients in their plan to make that happen.
Yeah, I think this is, I like that you had kind of two applications there, John. It can be you're just always running and not really feeling like you can save anything because your budget is out of whack and money's always going out more than it's coming in. And that could be the place you need to become unstuck, or it could be in your investment strategy. You may not feel like your money's growing because you don't have the right investment strategy in place. So there's a lot of applications today for getting unstuck and getting on track for financial independence. We're going to use, we love psychology here. We love to take a look at how real mindset change can happen, because really that's what we're talking about is change.
Right.
To get unstuck, you have to be willing to change. And we're going to use best-selling author Dr. Mary Lippitt, who has come up with a complex change model that is applicable to financial change as well. So according to her model, change requires vision, skill, incentives, resources, and an action plan. So those are the 5 things we're going to go over today: vision, skill, incentives, resources, and an action plan.
Scott, what we find with this, and what Dr. Lippitt has shown us, is that if any one of those elements is missing, then we can't make the progress that we want and need to make. And so if we go through that and look at, all right, on an individual basis, let's pull out each one of these. If you don't have vision, then that leads to confusion. If you don't have skill, it leads to anxiety. If you don't have incentives, there's gradual change. Okay, if you don't have resources, it leads to frustration. And if you don't have an action plan, it's a false start type of situation. So all of those elements, all 5 of them, really have to be combined in order for you to be able to make any significant change.
And I think that these elements are elements that are any significant change, as Janet said, but it's also very essential elements to a financial plan.
That's right.
You've got to have the vision of where you're going. you've got to have the skill brought to that financial plan for you to get there. Not necessarily your skill, but maybe an advisor's skill to come alongside you. You can't do everything. You don't do everything in your life, and money is no different. And so you need some skill maybe from the outside to help you with that. You need some incentives. And obviously at Gen Wealth, we do deal a lot with people who are ready to retire.
Right.
And that's an incentive
It
for
certainly is.
for a lot of people. And if you don't have that incentive, then you're really not ever going to get there. You're going to have some gradual change, but you won't have big change. And then the resources, obviously you've got to be saving and investing money. You've got to have the right investment resources. You've got to have the right planning resources, because as we are fond of saying, garbage in, garbage out on a financial plan.
Right.
If you don't have the right resources to bring to bear with this and get you down the road of where you want to go, there's going to be a problem.
Well, and I want to focus on that last one of the action plan itself, because we are incredibly planning focused at Gen Wealth. You can have all of these other elements in place, and if you don't put them together with a plan, then you're still not going to make the progress that you want and need to make toward your financial independence, toward your ideal retirement. It is imperative that you take all of those tools together and implement them with an action plan.
Scott, I would say that our listeners should grab a pen and a piece of paper and actually begin to write these things down, because I think these are so important to actually getting where you want to go. You've got to have that plan in place. You've got to have all those elements of a plan in place. And so grab a pen and a piece of paper and sit down and write down. Do I have the vision of what I need as far as my plan is concerned? Do I have the skill? Do I have the incentives? Do I have the resources? And do I have actually an action plan? We're fond here at Gen Wealth of talking about having a plan on paper on purpose. There's a reason for that. There is a reason that we write it down, because it becomes more real to you when you actually can touch it and feel it and go back and observe it. There's all kinds of plans that are made, Janet, over a cup of coffee at a table or something, and then all of that kind of gets left at the table once you get up and leave if you don't have it in writing.
John, one of the things one of the reasons that you and I have worked well over the years together as business partners is this combination of the visionary in you and the implementer in me. And when you think about that, that's a representation of this.
Yes.
You have to have the vision to be able to get started, but then we've got to walk through each of these steps and ultimately get to an action plan of, okay, how are we going to make that vision become a reality? Because you can sit around all day and dream about your retirement, but it's not going to get you anywhere. You have to be able to say, all right, what do I need to do today to make this a reality on whatever your timeline is?
And that goes to, before you can get to the how-to, you have to decide if there's a want-to.
Yes.
The vision is really about what does your future look like? I think I'm pretty good at the vision part, but that's a great point that you made, that only one of these is not going to get it done. You have to have them all. The vision can be just dreaming, but it can also be a real clear picture of how you want your life to be in the future, but you have to do the other steps to make it a reality. So we're going to talk on the other side of the break to LPL's Chief Market Strategist, Ryan Detrick. So we'll take a break on the Unstuck part and get into the economy, the markets, the election. No holds barred with Ryan when we come back on the Get Ready for the Future show.
At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is we believe in balance, and it's really a twofold standard. For our team, we believe that you've got to work and you've got to do things the right way, but you also have to have some time off, and you can't do your job if your job is all you do. For our clients, we believe in balance because their investment portfolios need to take as much risk as they need to achieve their goals, but not so much risk that they lose everything that they've got. Balance is incredibly important in both our team and for our clients.
There's always been power in standing up for what you believe in, challenging the status quo, and never accepting the ordinary. What about the rest of your life? Will you settle? Or will your retirement be more? More fun, more family than finances, more than just investments. Connect with us at Gen Wealth and harness the power of more.
From the Gen Wealth Radio Network studios, we're back with more of the Get Ready for the Future show.
Our show today, the topic is getting unstuck and on track towards financial independence, and we'll return to the action steps that we have borrowed, I guess you would say, from best-selling author Dr. Mary Lippitt, her model for complex change, and we'll get into that. But right now, we're going to step into our interview with LPL's Chief Market Strategist, Ryan Detrick. Ryan is with us right now. Good morning to you, sir.
Hey, guys. Good morning. I'm so glad to be here, and it's been a whole month since I last talked to you. It goes fast, but I'm glad to be back.
Any idea how many other interviews you've done since you last did one with us? I don't know, 100, 110?
It's been a few. You know, Bert and I just did one for like an hour. Bert White, I know you guys all know Bert. So Bert and I did something for an hour just a little bit ago. So it's a struggle working with Bert for an hour, but we made it. It was fun.
Well, we won't keep you that long, but you know, if Bert tells a story, that shouldn't be too difficult to do.
Very true.
Hey, as we speak today, Ryan, the Trump administration and Congress going back and forth on this potential another round of stimulus as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic, and lately the market, has seemed occasionally, at least, to rally or decline based on the status of those negotiations. What do you expect to come from this, and what does that expectation mean for equities?
Well, the truth of the matter is, guys, we think the odds of getting a next deal done before the election is easily less than 50-50. I mean, we're getting closer. We're better than we were 2 weeks ago. But the main sticking point between Republicans and Democrats continues to be, how much support do you give to local municipalities and states? And it just doesn't seem like the two sides are going to come to an agreement there. But the stock market's a funny thing, right? It's okay with waiting a little longer, because it realizes maybe after the election, you actually get a larger stimulus bill. And we think partially that's kind of why, stocks have done so strongly over the last 2 weeks. We had that 4-week losing streak, 10% correction in the S&P, more on the big cap tech names. Now, just as fast, we're bouncing back. The economy is still fairly strong. We can talk about that, but the market's okay to wait a little more, and maybe you can get a little bit larger stimulus package after the election. And that's where I think things are.
So, Ryan, how do you feel about the upcoming election, given the market's propensity to predict elections, as you have talked about over the years, and all the volatility that's going on? Are you getting a clear indication here, or what do you think about all this?
Yeah, well, John, I think the crystal ball is maybe a little foggy, but we'll talk about what we're seeing, right? Historically speaking, how stocks do ahead of an election is a really good indicator. What I mean by that is the S&P's up 3 months before or down 3 months before. If it's up, the incumbent party tends to win. If it's down, the incumbent party tends to lose. It's worked 87% of the time, going back to the Great Depression. The flip side of that is recessions are re-election killers. What I mean by that, the last 4 recessions we've seen since the Great Depression, the president up for re-election has never won. So you kind of have these differing sides of things, getting a little geekier. You look at wage growth, which we have had wage growth this year. Thank you to the CARES Act, maybe an exclamation point next to that, or an asterisk next to that. And the U.S. dollar's been weak. A weak U.S. dollar historically has been a good sign for the incumbent president. So what I'm getting at, there's all these different signs that we're seeing. At LPL Research, we put it like this. We do not think it's just so obvious that Joe Biden's going to win. We think it's maybe closer to a coin flip when we look at some of the other things. And at the end of the day, we think Congress will probably still be divided, with Republicans in the Senate and Democrats take the House. And at the end of the day, a divided Washington is actually one of the better scenarios from an investments point of view. We've had a divided Congress. The S&P is up 17% on average per year. Hadn't been down since the early 80s. We have a divided Congress this year and potentially another green year on the horizon.
Hey, Ryan, sticking with the topic of the election, let's look a little bit about big technology companies at this point. So what's the basis of your concern about a blue wave when it comes to big technology companies?
Yeah, Janet, that's a great question. And we've been getting that a lot here at LPL Research. What we just saw a week ago, just a week ago, House Democrats brought about a bill about some antitrust against some of the big FANG companies, in essence saying they're too powerful. So there is some potential concern if we get a blue wave. Could Democrats go after some of the big tech names? We don't think they're going to break them up, but maybe put some potential handicaps on them, and that could slow things down a little bit. But let's be honest. If you look at earnings season, which is starting off right now, technology continues to be the true all-star. In the second quarter, they're the all-star. There's just so many things that are major tailwinds for the group in general. We still like growth. We still like technology. After the election, we'll kind of watch it closely, but I'll wrap it up like this. In 2016, when President Trump won, Everyone said coal, steel, and financials would do well. They've struggled. And they said he's going to go after big cap tech, as he and Jeff Bezos and Google didn't like each other, or Amazon didn't like each other. Well, technology's done great the last 4 years. So it's fun to kind of say, well, this sector will do this based on this. Sometimes, we can be wrong in that. And I just want to stress that. So maybe continue to focus on the fundamentals. And the fundamentals of technology are still really, really strong. So let's not ignore that.
Scott, I want to hang out for just a second on this election before we move on, because you said something about a coin flip. I wonder what your thoughts are about the equities markets if we get into a situation that it's really not clear who the president is.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's only a few times that's happened in history. We had a contested election after 1960. It didn't last very long. The stock market took it in stride. Obviously, in 2000, from the election day in early November until I believe it was December 12th, when the Supreme Court finally said that George Bush won, the stock market pulled back about 10% approximately. If we get in that scenario, Bert and I, we talked about this. If it's just we're counting votes, we can go a couple days. Stock market will probably take that in stride. If there's a contested election, one of the two candidates just say, all out, guns blazing, get attorneys, go all out and try to sue and do this and that, the stock market's probably not going to like that. And we wouldn't be shocked at all if we had another 8 to 10% correction like we did in 2000. The good news to any of this is eventually we're going to get a president. And the other good news is whoever wins is going to have an economy that likely will not be in recession next year. Earnings growth up over 20% globally. So whoever gets the keys to the car is going to be in pretty good shape. But the stock market hates uncertainty, and that would lead to a lot of uncertainty should we have that very, difficult transfer of power, or who's going to take over, I guess we'll call it.
Short-term problems, but hopefully long-term growth. That's what we're hoping for there.
That's right.
We're talking to Ryan Detrick, LPL's chief market strategist, on today's Get Ready for the Future show. Well, let's talk a little fundamentals, Ryan. We always like to believe the market's going to eventually return to fundamentals, even though it throws fits from time to time. Earnings season has arrived. Investors are turning their attention to the results coming from corporate America. Give us the top things, maybe top three things that you and your team are looking for out of this round of earnings.
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to what I talked about. Technology and healthcare are the two all-stars, right? They did great in the second quarter. Those are the two biggest parts of the S&P 500. We think they're going to step up once again. If you look at what corporate America said so far in terms of the pre-announcements, by a 2-to-1 margin, we've had more positive than negative announcements. Usually it's the other way around. Normally you get all the bad news out first. So maybe corporate America, again, has seen some positive steps there. And, let's see, what's the last one I want to talk about? Here, about this. Normally, I think earnings are supposed to come in like negative 20% approximately year over year in the third quarter. You look at the last couple of quarters, we've had some major beats. Last quarter, the average S&P 500 company beat earnings by 20%, an all-time record. We're not expecting that again. But one thing we've seen with this economic recovery, employment has been weak. There's no doubt. Other parts of the economy, though, have been coming back stronger than most people expect, and we once again expect earnings season to suggest that. And as we head into the fourth quarter, might get close to break even in terms of earnings. Then by the first quarter next year, we're going to have positive earnings growth, and that should continue to drive things into 2021.
Ryan, we're seeing some allocation changes in some of the portfolios that your team is managing for us here at Gen Wealth and across LPL Financial. Give us some of the thoughts behind those allocation changes and what you're doing to implement those.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, coming into this year, I've talked to you guys a lot. We liked growth, right? We liked healthcare and technology and communications. But all of a sudden, you think about what's going on in the world, there are some positives. I just talked about the economy coming back. So we're looking at like some of the areas like cyclical value, industrials, materials, potentially small caps as well. And if the economy does better next year, those are the areas that do well. If you turn on CNBC, you hear cyclical value all the time. That just means if the economy is doing better, that's an area to go. So really the way we're looking at our portfolios as we head into 2021, I call it a barbell approach. On the one side, stick with who got you there. Tech and healthcare, they've done great. Communication services. But the other side of things, maybe industrials, materials, and small caps could do well. And that's from that barbell approach of the portfolio. You kind of insulated one way or the other. If you have a slowdown or an expansion, I mean, you don't have to just make one big bet. Let's be diversified and be smart about it. And those are some of the groups we do think will continue to do well into 2021.
Ryan, we're seeing an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases, the most since July at this point. Are you fearful of a return to more shutdowns if we continue to see more increased cases into the fall?
Yeah, I think we are. And you look at Europe. I mean, my goodness, Europe is having a major problem, especially Western Europe, with all of the huge spikes in cases in Europe. And, everyone said they had it under control a couple of months ago. So it's just this devastating fight that we will continue to do. Are we going to go down to the major lockdowns that we saw back in March and April? We don't think so. But could there be the rolling slowdowns and shutdowns? Sure. I mean, what did Disney just say? Disney just laid off 28,000 people. All right, 9,000 people at Allstate, or 9,000 people at Shell, 4,000 at Allstate, maybe 30,000 to 50,000 people in the airline industry, but there's probably going to be some help there. What I'm getting at is these you call a rolling shutdown. At the same time, what's going on with COVID is impacting people's lives and the services side of things. Manufacturing's come back, so it's still we're still a long way away. The good news, though, at least a long way away from a full economic recovery is what I should say. Good news is, yes, I mean, vaccines are getting closer. Last couple of days, maybe some negative news on some of the vaccines need to take a little bit of a pause. But look at the major therapeutic breakthroughs. We think, the market rallied a lot the last 2 weeks. President Trump got sick. Within 2 or 3 days, he's out of the hospital feeling good. Yes, he got all that cocktail of drugs because he's the president. But potentially, look what Bill Gates wrote about 2 days after he got out of the hospital. Would it be great if everything they just gave President Trump within 2 to 3 months, the average American can get? And that's potentially what the stock market sees on the therapeutic side of things, and that's major positive. So 6 months, 12 months from now, hopefully this is way in the rearview mirror.
Ryan, we've got about a minute left. I want to just get your quick thoughts on the election, but not the presidential election, but the congressional election. Obviously, the Senate is up for grabs.
Yeah.
Not much going on the House side, not a lot of big tectonic changes there. But what about the Senate, and how is that likely to affect equities?
Well, I mean, one of the fears we hear about is a blue wave potentially. Now, if you look in history, stocks have done pretty well under the blue wave scenario. But when you talk about the Senate, again, I kind of hinted at it earlier. We think this election is much closer. The presidential election is much closer than what people give it credit for. So likely the Republicans continue to have the Senate. And I'm right here in South Carolina, right across the border in North Carolina. There's some issues going on with the senators that are going for it from the Democratic side of things that might even sway this whole thing. Got himself in a little bit of trouble. So we're watching that one closely. But at the end of the day, we think a split Congress is still how this is all going to be all said and done in a month from now when we look up.
It is hard to believe that it's only about 20 days away, less than 3 weeks away till the election, and a lot could certainly change in that time frame. Ryan, thanks again for being with us. As always, we're very grateful for your time. I know, really, honestly, you are a very busy man, and thanks for making time for us.
Anytime. I'm honored to be here, guys. And I guess next time I see you, we'll have a new president. Let's hope, right?
Yes.
Not new. I didn't mean it like that, but we'll have a winner of the election is what I meant
We'll
to
have
say.
a result.
So,
That's right.
yeah.
All right, Ryan, thanks very much. So you get ready for the future show continues right after this.
Thank you. See you guys.
At GenWealth, one of our standards is that we value good communication. One of my favorite quotes about good communication is from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. If you ever doubt that, come to my house, listen to my 16-year-old son and my 13-year-old daughter having a conversation, and see what happens, because they will walk away with completely different understandings of the conversation that has occurred. It happens every time. It's okay, they're still learning communication. But here at GenWealth, we believe that that's something you need to experience every time you walk in our door, that you need to feel understood, that you need to feel listened to. So you'll see a change in how we're even communicating. If you're talking about something that's very serious, very personal, you'll even hear a change in our tone of voice, because that's just how good communication is supposed to be. But it also means that we can feed back to you what you've shared with us, just so you know that we're listening. We value good communication.
Education-driven, strategy-based, team-delivered. That's how we roll on the Get Ready for the Future show, and we're back for more.
Hey, our thanks again to Ryan Detrick from LPL Financial for joining us as he does each and every month. And if you listened to that interview, you heard a lot of talk about the upcoming election. We want to take a minute to give you an opportunity to think about, to find out a little bit more about the election. Obviously, we talked about it in that interview, guys, that things can change. We are 20 days out. That seems like a very little amount of time, but by the time we get to October 27th, when we hold our election town hall, we could be talking about a whole myriad of other things. It is a Facebook Live event. October 27th, the Election Town Hall. All you have to do is go to our Facebook page and say you're interested in going to this Facebook event, or you can click a link on our website, getreadyforthefuture.com. The Election Town Hall, we're going to be talking about actually, I would say it like this. I would almost say you can get your ears tickled on either direction as far as what candidate you want to win the presidential election or Congress or whatever you want to hear about the election. This is going to be a little different. This is going to be, how does it affect your pocketbook, right? What potentially could happen to the economy? What could happen to your investments based on the different scenarios that could take place as a result of the November 3rd election?
Scott, clearly there are completely different schools of thought between Biden and Trump on the issue of taxes. And taxes is a big deal when it comes to your money, because obviously the government gets the first bite of it before you even get it in most cases. Or if you're successful and you maybe get a capital gain on a stock or something,
right,
and you sell it, you're going to figure out that the government participates in that sale with you. So there are a lot of things afoot there, and we'll have several things that you can pretty well hang your hat on if President Trump is reelected. And then you'll have several things that Joe Biden has clearly said on his website that he would do from a tax standpoint. So we'll be delving into that, plus a lot of talk about just how the markets could react and things of that nature. Many of the things likely very much in line with what Ryan Detrick just talked about.
Yeah, and we're also very thrilled to have Roby Brock with us during that election town hall. I talked to Roby earlier this week. He's from Talk Business and Politics. They do an awesome job covering Arkansas politics with a little bit of national flavor as well. And they'll probably have some new polls out by then to give us kind of a little bit of a crystal ball on what may happen in the election. So join us for the Election Town Hall October 27th. It's a Facebook Live event. Just go to our Facebook page, say you're interested in going, and you'll be able to get some reminders, or you can find it with a link on our website, getreadyforthefuture.com. We're talking today about getting unstuck. We use the treadmill analogy. Do you feel like, financially speaking, that you're just running on this treadmill and never getting anywhere? How do you make change? And we talked about the want to. You have to want to make change first, but Dr. Mary Lippitt, who's a best-selling author, has come up with a complex change model that has 5 key things that you have to affect real change. And we're going to go over those 5 for the rest of this program. The first one, and I think it's so important that it's first, is vision. Among the 5 essential elements, vision is number 1. Without vision, the result is confusion. You know, I think about when I was a kid, my grandmother, I would talk to her about all my plans for the future. And by the way, I've probably never revealed this to you, but my big aspiration when I was about 7 years old was to be the chef in the White House.
When are you cooking for us?
Yeah, well, I don't know about if I was really on track for that goal, but I do like to cook, and I did then, and I used to always talk about that with my grandmother, among other things. But as I got older, I was always very future-focused. I've always been that way, so I have no problem with vision. The downside of that is she would always tell me, you're wishing your life away. You got to live in the present a little bit too, right?
Yeah.
But to cast that vision is so important. It just can't be a dream, Janet, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of my stories from childhood. We had my brothers are older than I am, and they had a bunch of Legos and all that kind of thing. And we had all kind of gotten through the Lego phase of life, but there were still some Legos lying around. And I was just kind of thinking about and making some notes about the future, and I found just a small box of Legos. There were not very many in there, and I took those little random pieces and I built a little house out of those Legos, and I put it in my window windowsill. And it was there to remind me, this was like in junior high, it was there to remind me that I wanted to be a homeowner at a young age. And I bought a house less than a year out of college, and where a lot of my friends were still in apartments and that type of thing. And guys, I still have that Lego piece in my office today. And at this point it represents different things. But it's so important for you to think about your goals and your values. That's what creates your vision. What's important to you? What do you want to do?
When it comes to your finances, I think the big kahuna as far as personal finance is concerned is people want to be financially independent. Yep. Now, what financial independence means to each other, each person is a little bit different, but you've got to have that clear vision of what financial independence would be like. What would it be like if you could make work optional? What would it be like if you went to work because you wanted to as opposed to because you had to? What would it be like if you didn't even have to go to work? Those are all things that I think people begin to think about when it comes to financial independence. And we want to ask you, what does it mean to you? And as you sit down and you write these things out, as we said earlier in the show, and you begin to fill in some of the blanks as far as vision is concerned, what is your vision for financial independence? As long as we've worked in this industry, Janet, we've heard almost every story that you can imagine about what people want to do when they retire or what people want out of their money. And financial independence is a big, I guess, general label on it, sort of like, I don't know, Xerox, if you will. It's like a general label for everything. But financial independence is one of those things that is very personal to people.
Yeah, and I think you just have to spend some time defining that. What does it look like for you? And your picture is going to be very different from any other conversation we've ever had with anybody here at GenWealth. It's your vision for your retirement.
It's the commonality here with everybody would be if you had enough money and enough time. Mm-hmm. But that's a big number that changes from person to person. Well, how much is enough money? Well, it comes back to income, right? So you have to have the plan in place that when you have enough money and enough time, that's financial independence. What does it mean to use? Casting that vision is so important. See yourself in the future doing what you'd like to do. Our second essential element to affect change is incentives. And, one of the disincentives of long-term planning is really the lack of instant gratification, right? I mean, that when we talk about feeling like you're on a treadmill, some of that has to do with the decision making that we're doing, right? I mean, I would I just bought a shirt on Facebook last night or through Facebook. I think about all those ads that are coming up when you see Facebook now. And now that I've bought that shirt, it was like a American Revolutionary type shirt, right? Now every history related T-shirt company that ever existed is on my Facebook feed. And I don't know that it's ever been harder, guys, to really delay gratification.
Well, delayed gratification is a lost art. The people who we work with today saved and scrimped and put money away and did whatever they had to do to get the wealth that they have today. And it doesn't happen overnight. There is no stock that you're going to go buy that is going to make you a millionaire. Now, you can hear stories about that, but those things don't happen on a regular. They just don't. And so you've got to understand that it does take discipline and some delayed gratification in the vein that we're talking about here to say, I am going to put off the small win today so I can get that big win in the future.
Guys, I've got college on the brain these days because my son is my son's getting acceptance letters and that kind of stuff. It's just kind of all coming in at this point. But this makes me think about in his college planning, and there's a parallel for retirement, but it's easier for us to see as parents. It's easier for us to see these things in our children. But when you think about these incentives and instant gratification on any given day, it is way more pleasant for my son to sit down and play a game on the computer rather than doing his homework assignment. It may be a small assignment, it may be a big one, doesn't matter. At this point, his GPA is like dancing on the borderline of where he needs to be. And so if he seeks that instant gratification rather than the long-term planning, rather than focusing on, man, I'm going to give up playing on the computer tonight so that I can get this work done, so that I can keep my GPA where it needs to be, so that I can get a scholarship, and that line of conversation just goes on out. And what's the parallel for you? What are you choosing to do that's easy and comfortable and rewarding and gratifying right now that really maybe you ought to think about your future self and say, you know what, I don't have to do that right now because I want to be able to do these other things in the future.
But at the same time, you have to give yourself a little outlet, right?
Yes,
you
absolutely.
Need a
There's
little
gotta be
fun
balance.
money.
Yeah.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
just, I call it planned spontaneity.
Yes.
Right? You have some cash set aside to
Yep.
whatever I wake up and feel like doing. That's what it's there for. It has a purpose, just like your budget has a purpose, and you don't go outside of that. I think that's why it's very difficult. We talked about the FIRE movement on this show before.
Yes.
The retiring early. That's very difficult to do for many reasons. On the back end, you have to live so long without a paycheck, but to get there, you have to always, constantly deprive yourself of instant gratification and never have that outlet. Very difficult to do. All right, our next one is skill. Without the skill, the result is anxiety. When it comes to personal finances, there's some skill I think you can obtain. There's some skill you can leverage with the use of a financial advisor. There is a foundational knowledge, though, that you really need to have.
Scott, it would be self-serving for us to sit here and talk about, they get the moment when they come into Gen Wealth because we have the magic wand. We don't have the magic wand necessarily, but what we do bring to the table is skill. We have got years and years of experience of working with people to help them get ready to retire. And it is that kind of relaxation, if you will. It is the completeness. It's the removal of that anxiety when you bring skill into the equation.
And sometimes that takes a while for you, as sitting on the client side, for you as the investor to really absorb that difference that the skill set brings in. Because there are people I've worked with for years, and they're anxious and anxious and anxious, and then one day they come in and it's like, okay, I get it. And we've transferred enough of that knowledge to them, the skill, if you will, that they're at a point that they can have some peace of mind. So I would say to you, being good at money isn't knowing something that you were never taught, but choosing a team you can trust to guide you through it.
Yeah, and if this sounds like a choice that you're ready to make, get that team. Get that team that will guide you through it. You can get started toward financial change by giving us a call. You can click a link in the comments if you're watching on Facebook today, or you can call us 501-653-7355 to set up a complimentary first appointment. It's just a discussion about your goals, setting that vision for your financial independence. A Gen Wealth advisor is ready to help. We're going to take a break and be back after this. The Get Ready for the Future show continues in a moment.
The beauty of a potter's work is that each item is unique. No piece is the same. That's what makes it art. At Gen Wealth, we believe your financial plan should be unique to you. Through our process, your money is carefully shaped around your goals and dreams. Your future, artfully crafted. Call us today or visit our website and connect with us. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors.
I don't think it's any coincidence that the Bible says, fear not, 365 times, one for every day of the year. At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is that we do not fear. We don't fear market downturns because we know that they're going to happen. We just simply plan for those things to happen and work around them. It's one of the things that we believe very earnestly, that you should never fear what you don't understand. You simply find a way to understand it and find a way to use it to your advantage. It's one of the Gen Wealth standards.
A smarter, simpler, more personal approach to retirement continues with the Get Ready for the Future show.
Talking about getting unstuck and on track for financial independence on today's Get Ready for the Future show, using 5 essential elements for change: vision, skill, incentives, resources, and an action plan. And we've talked about 3 of those: vision, skill, and incentives. We're going to get into this segment with resources and an action plan. Do want to wrap up by what we were talking about with skill. Needing a foundational knowledge can come through a trusted team to help guide you toward financial independence. Also, it can come through education. You can learn some things on your own, and we are there to help you out. Education is our passion. You can go get some resources at getreadyforthefuture.com. You can also plan to join us on October 27th for our election town hall. Are you worried about the results of this election? Are you worried about what's going to happen to your investments or what's going to happen to your financial future? We're going to be talking about those things on October 27th at our election town hall. Roby Brock will join us from Talk Business and Politics with the latest polling numbers and his insights. It is a Facebook Live event, and all you have to do is go to our Facebook page and say you're interested in going, and Facebook will give you those reminders that it's coming up. It's a week before the election, so hopefully it will be some very timely information. You can also find it at getreadyforthefuture.com, a link to sign up for the event. So do that. We're looking forward to bringing you that on October 27th. All right, so these final two essential elements, we'll start with resources. This is imperative to have to affect change. You know, we just talked about some of the resources, the educational resources that we have. You need resources to create a financial change in your life. They can come in many forms. Sometimes it's having the right tools to get started, and other times, guys, it's access to the right people to be able to help you.
Scott, I think about this kind of like almost like I think about the end of the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, it says in liberty and justice and a financial plan for all.
There you go.
I don't think that's the way I learned it.
But it's not how you learned it, but that's how it is around here at GenWealth. We believe that financial planning and financial services is a public service.
That's right.
This is what we do, and it's not just what we do to make a living, it's what we do to make a difference. And when you understand that the key to this is having the right resources, you understand a lot about GenWealth. Number one, GenWealth is in a position where we do not have account minimums. We don't say that you've got to have so much money in order to have access to a good financial plan. All you have to do is come in and sit down and work with us, and we will help you get there. And if you've got a few $100s that you want to get started into a Roth IRA as an example, you can do that. If you've got millions of dollars and you want to pave your way to financial independence, you can do that. So the door is very wide open here at GenWealth. And I think about it, guys, when you think about what we did at the very beginning of this company, when we chose LPL Financial as our broker dealer, we did that so we would have the resources to basically pass along to our clients. We did not limit ourselves in terms of offerings or products or anything of that nature, because we don't believe that there's a one size fits all for anybody.
Yeah, that was critical in our decision-making process, and it is important to you as an investor to understand the distinction that gives us. The point of being independent in this industry is very important to understand, because if you're working with an advisor who is not independent, then number one, they're having to utilize the products that their company is telling them, hey, this is what you need to sell. Okay. Number two, when you begin to look at the product selection, sometimes there are proprietary products that may or may not be the best selection out there, but they have to use those proprietary products. With us, if being affiliated with LPL, the advantage to you is that we are completely independent, which means if we're working with, Mr. and Mrs. Investor, then as we put together the plan for Mr. and Mrs. Investor, then we get to go then to the entire selection of products that are available. As long as they are not proprietary to one particular company, we have the ability to choose from all of those products out there and decide what is going to be in your best interest from all of the products that are available in order to implement your plan. And it starts with that plan first. It's very critical to begin to look at that. That is a resource, frankly, that you need to have in your toolkit to have a financial plan to guide you along the way.
Scott, speaking of resources, this show is a resource. Mm-hmm. Our website is a resource. Our workshops are a resource, whether they're in person or online. Yeah. Our town hall coming up is a resource. We don't do this just because we like to hang out with each other at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night before the election.
Right.
We do this because we want to pass along information to you so you can make better decisions about what may be going on in your finances. Resources are plentiful at GenWealth. You got to be able to access those resources and have the uptake of those resources in order to affect that positive outcome that you're looking for.
Well, before we leave the resources, I want to throw another one out there to bang the LPL drum just a bit. Brian Detrick on the show earlier, LPL Financial, LPL Research, about a 60-person team. That's who we leverage. They're always looking at the economy and the markets and providing data and research to us to help us make decisions for our clients' investments. All right, so our final one, as we wrap up the show today, an action plan. You knew it was going to come back to a plan. It always comes back to a plan. It should come back to a plan, because if you don't have it on paper on purpose, it is still just floating out there in the breeze. You know, we talked about the vision. Let's connect the dots here. You start with a vision. It's in your head. You're just thinking about it, and that's great. And I spend a lot of time thinking about what my life's going to be like in 20 years. But if I don't put it on paper into an action plan, how do I ever really move forward?
You know, I was thinking about the content of this show as I was working with some clients earlier this week. They are in really good shape. They have done all of the things that they had to do through the years to be able to save. They had all of the elements in place. The only thing that they did not have is the action plan. They had the vision. They knew what they wanted. They knew when they wanted to retire. They knew that they had to save money to get there. They had some skill about that. They had, utilized the resources that they had. They had all those things in place, but what they did not have is that action plan. And we laid out an action plan for them on paper, on purpose. We actually did the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process. And when you get one of those, you see very clearly where your money's coming from, where it's sequenced from, how much it's going to be. We talk about before tax and after tax money. So you get spendable income. You have that action plan that you can take advantage of in the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process. And it was just a beautiful thing to understand what the doctor has told us here about the things that really do affect change. And change is coming to these folks because they're likely to be retired come January 1.
Yeah, we said if you don't have an action plan in place, according to the doctor, that's going to lead to a false start. So having money really is not the same as knowing how to use it. That's critical to understand. That means that a plan is not a secret stash of cash that you don't touch, nor is it a single financial product that somebody sold you 10 years ago. It's ever changing. I think that's a critical point, guys, that people need to understand. We used to use the analogy, John, about a snapshot, a photograph versus a video. Your plan is a snapshot in time, but it needs to change over the years. It needs to be adjusted because life is a video. Your financial life is a video. It is ever changing, and there's no way that something that you did 10 years ago can be exactly on track for where life is right now. You need to be able to make some adjustments along the way. So it's critical to revisit, not only have a plan to start with, but to revisit that plan over time.
And you might say, well, a plan's going to be costly. It's going to cost me time. It's going to cost me money. There may be some cost involved in it if you sit down with one of our advisors, and it will cost you a little bit of time to pull some information together. But think about what it will cost you if you don't do it.
That's right.
It is that false start. It is not getting off the ground as far as your plan is concerned and not being able to see the change that you're looking for. I have seen dreams get crashed into the ground because people were afraid to spend a little bit of money to be sure that they had a lot of money in the future. And you can't make decisions like that. You can't be penny wise and pound foolish. You've got to think about the big picture. And I think spending whatever money may be necessary to get a financial plan is key to that element.
Yeah, you mentioned, Janet, the plan is not a secret stash of cash. That's a just-in-case retirement. You don't want a just-in-case retirement. That's not financial independence. You heard the bell there. It's time for our final thoughts. I go back to the treadmill. That treadmill's been stuck in my head since the beginning of the show. I said you can't really see any progress. That's not entirely true. I used to run on a treadmill with a floor-to-ceiling window. I could see out there. I could see that I could be going out there. I was just stuck on that treadmill. Do you feel like you can maybe cast that vision, but you have no idea how you're going to get there? These steps and reaching out to a Gen Wealth financial advisor can move you off that treadmill, outside that gym, and toward your financial goals.
Scott, I think change is difficult for a lot of people. Inertia takes over sometimes, and it's hard to break out. But you've got to break out, and you have the 5 elements now. If you did what we said at the beginning of the show and wrote those things down, you've got those 5 elements. You could fill in the blanks with the things that we've talked about. Now it's up to you. Now it's time for you to take the action that's necessary to make all this come to fruition. You can do that by clicking the link if you're watching on Facebook Live, or give us a call at 501-653-7355. Final thoughts, Janet?
My thoughts go back to what you said about cost. There's some cost in getting a plan together, yes, but I'll give you an example of a family I met with years ago that, as a result of meeting with me, they also met with an estate planning attorney that I encouraged them to meet with, and that meeting saved them $45,000 later on. It was worth the cost of meeting with me and of meeting with the estate planning attorney. How many $45,000 decisions do you have in your future? Give us a call.
We have offices in Conway, in West Little Rock, Bryant, Hot Springs, El Dorado, and Northwest Louisiana. That's it for today's Get Ready for the Future show. We'll see you again next week.
The Gen Wealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 501-653-7355. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA